back outside the courthouse to our Yasmin Vasugian, and you have some reporting on other color from inside the courtroom, Cohen's demeanor, and how the jury is maybe acting during this time.
We're not getting color necessarily on the jury. Remember, only the folks that are inside the courtroom can actually see the jury. If you're in the overflow room, you can't necessarily see the jury. But important to note when it comes to the way in which Cohen is addressing the jury. And I bring this up because some of the color that we're getting from inside the courtroom from Laura Jarrett, the two separate times in which Michael Cohen was asked, one, about the raid on his apartment in 2018, and then two, about the phone call that he got from Donald Trump and how it made him feel. He actually turned his body and addressed the jury directly instead of talking specifically to Hoffinger. Remember, throughout the entire day and a half of his testimony, he has literally remained fairly straightforward, looking directly to Hoffinger, answering her questions and answering the questions that are asked. But here it seems as if he is trying to humanize himself in addressing the jury to make them or help them understand how it is he was feeling when that raid took place and how it was he was reacting to Donald Trump's support. We're also getting some color when it comes to the former president himself as he is sitting at the defense table. I mentioned earlier how his eyes were mostly closed at times, speaking with Bovee to the left of him. But now he seems more animated, more involved in listening to the testimony, especially the exchanges between himself and Michael Cohen after the raid. And I'm told he's also passing notes to Todd Blanche throughout this period as well, as Michael Cohen is testifying specifically to the text message that Donald Trump put out that many of us remember with regards to Maggie Haberman, in which he said, and this has already been admitted into evidence, by the way, earlier with another witness, in which he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, essentially, Michael Cohen is a good man, he's a family man, so on and so forth, and we will go on and support him, and asked Michael Cohen about his reaction to that. He said, well, I felt that Donald Trump was being loyal, and it kept me within the fold. I wanted to remain loyal to Donald Trump at that moment when he sent out that tweet about Maggie Haberman, guys.
We begin this hour with some breaking news. A bus crash in Florida this morning has killed at least 8 people and injured dozens more. CBS News correspondent Nancy Chin joins me now here in Studio 57. Nancy, thank you so much for making your way here. I know you've been following these very late breaking details. There's not that much information. What do we know so far?
Sure, and we just heard officials giving a little bit of an update on what they know at this point. But emergency officials, they said a bus carrying approximately 53 migrant workers collided with a truck in Marion County this morning. That is just north of Orlando, timing around 6:30 a.m. Eastern time. The bus, we understand, swerved off the road before it crashed through a fence. And as you can see in these aerial video images right there, ended up on its side. This is in a field. At this point, 8 people have died. At least 45 people were injured. They were taken to nearby medical facilities. Right now, we're waiting on word of how their status will progress throughout the afternoon. But authorities say the workers were being taken to Cannon Farms, that is in the city of Dunedin. They had been harvesting watermelons. Here's what officials said at a news conference that just wrapped.
And with that, I can tell you that it's going to be probably 6 months at least before we conclude factually what transpired here today. But that's what I know at this point. We will have this road closed until our investigators can do everything they need to do on the scene as far as mapping, measurements, photography, whatever is included in their on-scene investigation. We've also been joined by our Commercial Motor Vehicle Bureau. They're going to be doing some of the legwork and the inspections on the bus that was involved. What I can tell you that there was approximately 50 people on this bus. My understanding, they were farm workers, and they were en route to a farm in the area.
And the Florida Highway Patrol currently on site investigating. We understand the National Transportation Safety Board is monitoring the situation. The Marion County Sheriff's Office said westbound lanes on Highway 40 there will be closed for most of the day. So something for folks in that area to keep in mind. It is also asking drivers to take alternate routes. But Lilia, this is something they're saying this investigation could last months, potentially 6 months. There are so many unanswered questions and so many lives that were affected in this.
And one has to think, just as happened with the bridge collapse, I mean, they said it's migrant workers. With that incident, it was just, it was a much smaller number of people, but it's hard to find the family members. We're reaching out to the consulates and trying to get more information, as I'm sure you are. Nancy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That we're fighting here for our freedom, for our European freedom. We want a future. We do not want Russia. We will never want Russia.
These protests have been driven by Georgia's Gen Z young people. They believe that they are correct. They believe that they are standing up for their future like their parents did decades ago, standing up against the Soviet regime. The Georgian parliament, dominated by the Georgian Dream Party, passed this controversial law on the transparency of foreign funding, seen by the opponents of this law as a Russian law. They're saying it's a Russian-style law designed to stifle dissent.
It is dragging us back into the same hole that we finally crawled out of. It is endangering our future with the European Union and our future altogether. People in there are old and outdated. People here are young and full of spirit of freedom.
Take us inside right now. What's happening?
Yeah, a lot happening so far, right? We're 30 minutes into this thing. We've already got a lot. We're getting to the crux of this whole thing, right? Yesterday, we heard a lot of incredible testimony from Michael Cohen. We got to the intent as to why essentially Donald Trump would have wanted to pay off Stormy Daniels. We talked about the January 16th and or 17th meeting. Michael Cohen was unclear about the date in which essentially Donald Trump, Alan Weisselberg, Michael Cohen were in that room in Trump Tower saying, we're going to say legal services rendered. We'll be paying you monthly $35,000 a month per the math that was done by Alan Weisselberg on that First Republic Bank evidence admitted into testimony yesterday. But now we are getting to the crux, guys. And I want to read for you a couple of parts of things that have happened so far this morning, talking about the checks and the invoices and the ledgers specifically. Let's talk numbers for a moment, just to remind folks before I get into this. We've got 34 counts here, right, under that original indictment. 12 counts when it comes to ledgers, 11 counts with invoices, 11 counts with checks. Reminder, this is all about falsifying business records. It's not about paying off Stormy Daniels. It's not about allegedly having sex with Stormy Daniels back in 2006. It is all about saying legal services rendered and falsifying those business records in repaying Michael Cohen. Some exchanges here, guys, just to bring you up to date. It's what's happening inside the courtroom this morning. Hoffinger saying, where did the discussion take place on February 8th of 2017? And he said the conversation took place in the White House. They go on. I was sitting with President Trump, and he asked me if I was okay. He asked me if I needed money, and I said, all good. He said, I could get a check. I said, no, I'm okay. And he said, okay, make sure you deal with Alan. Was the invoice for any services you had rendered for those 2 months? No, ma'am. And for services rendered, was that a truthful statement? No, ma'am. What was the true purpose? The reimbursement of hush money and Red Finch. Remember, $50,000 went to Red Finch, $130,000 went to Stormy Daniels, $60,000 in bonuses. The rest of the money, adding up to $420,000, was grossing up Michael Cohen to cover his taxes for this payment. Hoffinger said, was this invoice a false record? Yes, ma'am. Were any of the invoices that you created for services rendered pursuant to a retainer agreement? Cohen says, no, ma'am. They were for reimbursement. Again, guys, this is getting to the crux of this whole thing, falsifying business records. This is where they not only talk about the fallout in 2017, but then also we're going to get into Michael Cohen lying under oath and being a convicted felon. The prosecution is going to have to cover this, understanding that is what the defense is going to go for and cross.
French prison officers have been killed and 3 others wounded when gunmen ambushed the van in which they were transporting a convicted felon at a motorway toll station. It happened near Rouen. 2 vehicles were used to ram the prison vehicle, but it's not known how many attackers were actually involved. President Macron has said everything was done to find those involved, with hundreds of police officers now deployed in the hunt. The escaped prisoner was being returned to jail after a court hearing in a nearby city. Well, let's get the very latest. Let's speak to Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, who's in Paris for us. Well, a very, very serious incident here. Just bring me a little more detail. I read out the bare bones of it, but what else do you know?
Well, we know that this happened shortly after 11 a.m. this morning, Paris time, which means at 10 a.m. this morning, and it was very obviously organized. And the idea, the van, which is an armored van with guards inside, was the ferrying this prisoner who had just been at Rouen for a judicial hearing. And it was attacked at the toll booth because that's where everything slows down, and it was filmed by people in a bus that was in a different bay at the toll booth, who suddenly sort of found themselves outside their windows with a scene of war. The criminal is age 30. He is known. His nickname is the Fly. He's Mohamed Betchar. He is very obviously, this was organized. He had tried to escape 2 days ago and had been caught at it. Somebody had given him something to saw open the bars on his window. And very obviously, the whole thing was probably to stop the current proceedings, because the hearing that he was going for had to do with burglaries. But he's also he is suspected heavily of being a narcotics boss. And from the organization that he can muster, I mean, you could think you're in Mexico. You've now got 200 gendarmes in pursuit. The gendarmes are the police for the countryside, so to speak, but they are military. And there's a plan which is for serious crime and violent crime of that matter, called the Sparrowhawk Plan, which had been deployed. We've had promises from various ministers that they would be caught shortly. It is really something that the French are shocked with, because the cold-bloodedness with which they killed 2 people and could have killed 3 more, and for one of the people who were in hospital, of the guards who were in hospital, we're still not sure. And it was done with great efficiency. The Minister for Justice said that justice would be done, etc. President Macron waded in and said, we will be implacable. I mean, there's lots of adjectives, and we do know that there's a dragnet over that region of the country.
Anne-Elisabeth Moutet there in Paris. Thanks very much for updating us on that very serious story. If there's more, we will return to Paris and get the latest. But